Hello comic book fans, here's Earl Grey. I've thought long and deep about making some best-of lists. Best writers, best artists, that kind of thing. But always eventually found me in quite a mess not being able to come to a final decision in comparing apples and oranges. But when I tried a different approach and wrote down a list with 20 favorite comic characters, everything was suddenly a cinch. Ironically, I usually follow certain artists or writers rather than characters. But maybe that's the reason why this list was so much easier to do. By the way, one of the rules that I made for this selection was to include not more than one character from one comic series. So this is the reason why you'll not find Batgirl or the Joker in this list. And I think I'll do this in 2 videos. Anyhow, here we go. I start with rank 20, and that's Zippy the Pinhead, created and drawn by Bill Griffith. Zippy is one of the most genuine characters that originated in American underground comics from the 1970s. He's a microcephalic sporting a clown suit with polka dots. We can see him in absurd adventures, in which he partakes with full blast enthusiasm and nonsensical or at least surreal comments. Zippy embraces the world and obscure pop culture artifacts with the purest genuine and innocent naivety, which makes him some sort of archetype of the innocent nerd in all his peculiar glory. Rank 19 was a tough one, I have to admit. As much as I still love the comic version of The Walking Dead, as much do I have some troubles with the TV series right now. The last season was a pain for the most part, especially when you-know-who died and they can't stop mourning for one episode after the other. Yeah, I think I'm done with the series, with the TV series, that is. But I'll stick with the comic, of course. And even though Michonne is not a central character anymore, at least in the comic, there has hardly ever been a cooler first appearance in comics than Michonne with her 2 pet zombies. Next up in line, Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. Yeah, despite of my hippie-ish attitude sometimes, I'm all in for some very single-minded macho action funfest, especially when it's written by Garth Ennis. Speaking of Ennis, I should have included some character from Preacher in this list, but I couldn't decide whether I should choose Jesse Custer, Cassidy or Assface. So in a move of impeccable logic, I haven't picked any of them. And so on the next rank follows Alec Holland or Swamp Thing, the monster with a soft inside. The human trapped in a plant body, which sets him aside from humanity, makes him the great loner, often misunderstood and hunted. As a lot of the most striking comic characters are loners, excluded from the rest of the world for some more or less obvious reason. Some of these loners are of course on the other end of the spectrum, adventurous, cool guys who are rather self-reliant than lonely. For an example, Corto Maltese, created, written and drawn by the Italian Hugo Pratt, which makes Corto one of the few European comic characters in my list. This was one of the surprises for me when doing this list. In my mind, there are a lot more impressive comic characters in American comics than in European comics. Maybe European comics aren't so much about single characters, but about atmosphere, stories, and generally shorter narratives. I don't know. Corto Maltese is definitely a character that is more a visitor in his own stories, an observer who's hard to define. But exactly that is one of the qualities of Hugo Pratt's stories. On rank 15 I have Robert Crumb's one and only Mr. Natural. He embodies Crumb's distant and twisted relationship with the alternative and hippie culture of the 60s and 70s. Mr. Natural possesses cosmic awareness, but can be very cynical and condescending towards those who don't have his insights. He's a moody and very often sadistic guru who exploits his, so to speak, disciples. Most of the time he's an arrogant douchebag, but a very cool one, and he tells us definitely some lesson. On 14, Wonder Woman. Yeah, what a multifaceted character she is. For me, she's mostly intriguing because of her relationship to ancient Greek mythology. And therefore the new 52 run, written by Azzarello and drawn by Cliff Chiang for the most part, is my favorite Wonder Woman saga. Because no one before has used the ancient gods as poignant as them. To be honest, I shortly pondered if I should choose the god Mars, aka War, instead. But Diana has this long, interesting legacy from the Golden Age up to now, so it has to be her. But another side character has to be included in this list, and that's Matthew, the Raven of a Dream in the Sandman. He was once Alec Holland's friend Matthew Cable and had a very peculiar and long-winded life with some ups and a lot of downs in Swamp Thing and Doom Patrol. But then he died. Actually, I can't remember how exactly, to be honest. But he died and reappeared, reincarnated as a raven in Neil Gaiman's Sandman. Here you can see him drawn by Jill Thompson. For me, it's a great joy to see how he embraces his second chance, how he obviously takes a lot of pleasure seeing the advantages in being a bird. Even if it means that rats are your favorite dinner. It's always a comic relief when he calls the dark and brooding dream boss, or makes some witty remark on the grave dialogues of the endless. On rank number 12 there is Adele Blanc-Zec. She's a writer of crime fiction in Paris who got involved in mysterious and harebrained adventures before and after the First World War. During the war she was temporarily dead, but that's just some of the minor crazinesses and the tumultuous adventures written and drawn by Jacques Tardy. Adele is witty, charming if there's a need to be charming, and cunning if there's a need to be cunning. She's just very cool, and of course I love these crude adventures full of monsters, table-shifting, walking mummies, and a zillion of goofy gangsters and crazy professors. My 11th favorite comic character, and the last one for today, is Jack Knight, aka Starman. He is the son of the Golden Age Starman and is at first very reluctant towards the idea of taking over the mantle from his father. But when he becomes Starman, he finds the superhero within himself, so to speak. Or maybe, in other words, because of his struggles and inner antagonisms, he is able to become an even more believable superhero. This comic is one of the best ever told, and that's definitely for a good part because of the immensely well-fleshed out main character, whose character development and enthusiasm is very impressive and almost seizable. The comic is drawn by Tony Harris for the better part and written by James Robinson, and should be read whether you're into superheroes or not. So, what are your favorite comic characters? In case you're interested about my top 10, watch the next video, which will be Panellogy 217. But for now, thanks for listening and watching. Goodbye.